Now, to describe Max Blumenthal as an author and journalist and editor is like saying Ronaldo is a footballer. Yeah, he's a footballer, but he's the greatest footballer. And Max Blumenthal is the greatest breaker of stories over these last years, stories that the powerful didn't want you to know. That's why he gets the brickbats. But along with the brickbats comes the respect and admiration of millions of people around the world. People were talking to me in Caracas just yesterday about Max Blumenthal and the Grey Zone News, and so they should. And you should all follow the Grey Zone. Max, it's a big, big, big story, this California fires. I spoke with our friend Garland Nixon about it earlier. So there's not much more for us on this show to say about the fires. But I do think there's more to say about the ownership of the water resources of California by not just individuals, but individuals who funnel California's money that they get from owning the water resources to starving the Palestinian people of water in the occupied territories. This story of these fires has so many quirks to it. You'd almost think there was a divine hand at work in the situation there. What can you tell us about the Resnicks?
Well, first of all, thanks for the generous introduction. I hope I can live up to all that.
Sure.
And, sorry if I seem a little ruddier than usual. Just came from a long walk in the snow here in D.C. where we actually have water. I lived in L.A. for several years. And when I left, on the day I left, the city was actually surrounded in wildfires. I remember getting an infection, just feeling like the smoke was hanging thick over the city, like the city was uninhabitable. And that's part of the problem here, is that the city has grown far beyond its natural potential. Many of the people who are being impacted by the fire, working class, I have close friends who lost their homes, but also extremely rich people like the genocidal fanatic James Woods, who's now complaining about price gouging because his neighbors were paying an $18,000 lease for a home. Their home was burned down, and now they're being asked for $30,000. These are the problems that some of the rich are facing in the Palisades. James Wood, someone who has celebrated the destruction of homes, liquidation of entire families in Gaza, and he's not backing down on that. So there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on. You are referencing the Resnick family, who own enormous amounts of land in the Central Valley of California. Now, if you have ever driven up the 5 highway from Los Angeles to San Francisco, that's the breadbasket of America. And pistachios are the cash crop from that area that takes up the most water. We're talking about thousands and thousands of gallons just to produce one bag of wonderful pistachios, which is the company owned by the Resnick family. Now, one of the interesting things about the Resnick family is that they supported sanctions on Iran, and I believe they donated to the main think tank in Washington, which is like an Israeli front group called the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, which lobbied for sanctions on Iran. Mark Dubowitz, their CEO, has designed the sanctions on Iran. Now, why would they be interested? Maybe they're ideologically Zionist, but there's another aspect to it. Iran produces the best sanctions, and they're basically killing the competition through the sanctioning of Iran and cornering the market so that California pistachios are the only thing on the supermarket table. And they own not just the water that is irrigated from under the ground, that deprives smaller farmers and just average people in California of water. They also own Fiji Water, the Fiji Bottled Water Company, and they've backed up a military junta which allows them to offload fresh water from Fiji onto a tanker that they then ship to wealthy people in the West. So it's a pretty disturbing story. I mean, what we're seeing through the fires, what we see through every natural disaster or industrial disaster in the U.S. now, whether it's East Palestine, Ohio, or Lahaina, Hawaii, which is we lift the mask and see the inequality in this oligarchy that we live in.
Yes, I mean, it's almost karmic, the connections that you can make. But it has surely done for, in any sane polity, the policy of sending hundreds of billions of dollars abroad whilst your own fire hydrants don't have any water. Surely somebody somewhere is, adding 2 and 2 and coming up with 4. If we hadn't sent all that money overseas, maybe we wouldn't have so many disasters and the disastrous end result of natural problems that occur, floods and so on. We wouldn't be short of money to help the people afflicted by these disasters if we weren't spending it all in Ukraine or sending it to Israel.
I mean, LA is a special case here, and there's a huge debate in the city over whether the fire department had enough money and whether it would have made a difference. And some of my friends in LA are saying, I'm not there right now, so I can't give you the best expertise or analysis from the ground on this. But they're saying, 4 massive wildfires at once in the interior of the city with 80 to 100 mile per hour Santa Ana winds. What could anyone have done against that? I mean, the city was always prepared for one massive wildfire, and it usually hits in the more outer hills. But there has been a debate over whether the fire department had enough money because Mayor Karen Bass increased the police department budget, the LAPD department budget. It was a political move. It was a backlash against Black Lives Matter and the defund the police campaign. And it was also partly a response to a lot of petty crime that's been happening because LA gentrified its Skid Row area downtown and started moving this massive homeless population, which was like just a city within a city, into other areas like Echo Park, where like yuppies live. And people got upset with people who are mentally ill carrying out, small scale property crimes, defecating on the corner. The police budget went up. The fire department budget went slightly down. I see the right wing trying to blame this all on DEI because they have like a lesbian fire department chief, fire chief. I mean, that would be like me blaming, the fact that the Washington Commanders, our NFL team, has male cheerleaders now for the fact that they won't win the playoff game tonight. It just doesn't really add up for me. However, I mean, there is a reality now in LA and across the country. We're seeing more and more of these kinds of massive natural disasters as partly just a lack of municipal planning. And what would be wrong with reallocating, first of all, some of the money being sent to Ukraine? 175 billion has been sent to Ukraine. Some of it should be sent to allow for planning for future natural disasters in the U.S. Number 2, all people below a certain income level in Los Angeles who lost their homes. A friend of mine lost her home and her art archive, which was her entire business. She lost everything because it was just in her small home. So many people, or small business people, lost everything like that. Should have their home rebuilt for free instead of reallocating that money to AI murder warlords like Peter Thiel and Parker Lucky and Mark Andreessen and this AI cartel, which is going to get basically no bid defense contracts to do targeting, not just in Ukraine, but in Gaza. And we can consider the words of none other than Vladimir Zelensky to Lex Friedman in this clownish interview he gave, this podcast interview Zelensky gave in English, where he complained that the $175 billion never actually reached Ukraine. This is Zelensky saying it. He said half of it just went back to these warlord contractors in the U.S., these white-collar, genocidal, soft-handed, eccentric, racist maniacs. And I mean, if that money is just being given back to our upper class, this is the biggest money laundering scheme we've ever seen. The money should be immediately reallocated to Lahaina, to LA, and to rebuild this country and plan for the future, because this won't be the last kind of disaster we see like this.